Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Dev Diary, where today we continue working in our game about preferential difficulty. Now last time we added even more attacks to the boss enemy, further broadening the difficulty concept. The additions included attacks based heavily on timing that also forced me to reconsider the approach to future attacks. Since diversity in the difficulty was an important part of the concept, we were going to have to focus on a more general but still dynamic approach moving forward. Which is where today's session takes us. A tier stat was added to the list of things that the player can alter. Currently, the stat starts at 3 and is lowered by 0.2 each time it's modified. This tier stat decides the level of chaos boss attacks will feature. Now, for example, the general shoot attack. New variables have been added to the projectile object to allow for explosions and blast bursts. The boss's shoot attack will enable these new features depending on the current tier, with a new event trigger replacing the immediate destruction of the projectile object. So now, in the projectile object, when this new event is triggered, if the explosion feature is active, the projectile is switched to a new state. This event also changes the projectile into a stationary AoE explosion, with its own sprite and everything. The state itself is simply a timer, and if the blast burst feature is enabled, on destruction, the projectile will create a random flower pattern style burst of default projectiles. This allows for a much more dynamic and chaotic change to the basic shoot attack. While the explosive nature needs tweaking, the attack itself is far more deadly now that it can also create more bullets. So 3 simple shots could end up being like 12 before the attack phase is even over. Now, a few changes to projectiles is fun and all, but we could get even crazier. So the dash attack has also been updated. At tier 1, the boss creates a trail that'll hurt the player on contact. This trail is simply our danger object stretched and skewed based on the boss's position. Tier 2, however, steps things up and begins creating explosions along that newly created trail, which is accomplished by, well, creating explosive projectiles randomly along the trail and instantly triggering them. The end result is yet again a much flashier and crazier variation of the dash attack. Not only is this far more imposing at the highest tier, but it's also a lot more dangerous. And I think this best exemplifies what the goal of this tier system is supposed to achieve. The mechanics aren't any tighter, nor do they require anything but the player's base stats. However, the highest tier will still require players be a lot more careful than the lowest tier. Now, I have no idea if this is even making sense, so let's move on. Finally, we have the burst attack, which is somewhat a hybrid between the first two. At tier 1, the attack creates a trail, which, much like the dash, does damage on contact. Tier 2, on the other hand, creates that blast burst effect from the shoot attack. Now, going back to the projectile object, the trail is yet another added feature. When active, this will create a trail based on random chance, and for now it's set at 50. The danger object that it spawns now also features fade related variables. So if the fade feature is active, the image alpha for the object will slowly drop. Once the alpha hits 0 or less, the object is destroyed. Thus, our trail becomes a temporary threat. Which doesn't sound too bad, however in practice, especially alongside the tier 2 burst, this attack alone turns the game into much more of a bullet hell than ever before. And with that potential 12 shots from the shoot attack significantly increases here to potentially like 24 or 32 projectiles over the course of the attack, depending on how the game rolls. So, as much as I dig this new approach to the boss's attacks, there's clearly room for balancing. But this is where I decided to call it for this session. I wasn't sure how these would end up playing out, so starting with 3 seemed like the most sensible approach. I'm also trying to think of new and exciting variations for some of the attacks, just so, we're not repeating too many features. I mean, I don't want to pull a Michael Bay and just have everything explode. But on reflection, I'm liking this approach far more than adding attacks that are just too restrictive. With the tier approach, the timing of the X laser and the spike walls can be balanced out further, and difficulty can be tweaked via chaos instead. It's a very attractive alternative that I'm hoping won't come to bite us later. But for now, I remain optimistic. So with that said, brings us to the end of today's Dev Diary. So if you enjoyed today's entry, consider leaving a like. Be sure to also subscribe and hit that bell if you haven't already. Let me know what you think of the new approach. What type of variations would you like to see added next? Leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.